Steven Crowder is wrong about transgenderism. One claim you'll hear him make on the subject is that pro-trans bathroom policies will somehow endanger the safety of women.
So this week there was a big controversy at Planet Fitness when this person wanted to use a ladies' restroom. One lady felt uncomfortable, complained, at which point her membership was promptly revoked because, tolerance. The transgender community touts this as a major victory where many women feel less safe.
Now, there's actually been research on this question of, do these pro-trans bathroom policies lead to any sort of harmful outcomes that threaten the safety of women? And the research just does not support the Republican viewpoint on the subject. For example, a 2019 study by Hazenbush et al. Found the following, quote, "This study presents findings from matched pairs analysis of localities in Massachusetts with and without gender identity inclusive, public accommodation, non-discrimination ordinances. Data come from public record requests of criminal incident reports related to assault, sex crimes, and voyeurism in public restrooms, locker rooms, and dressing rooms to measure safety and privacy violations in these spaces. This study finds that the passage of such laws is not related to the number or frequency of criminal incidents in these spaces. This study provides evidence that fears of increased safety and privacy violations as a result of non-discrimination laws are not empirically grounded," end quote. Now, if you look at other states that also have similar such pro-trans policies, you find the same thing. Media Matters, for example, they reached out to a wide variety of police departments in many such locales, and in all cases, they reported no increase in crimes related to these pro-transgender policies. Here are some quotes from the article. Quote, "Iowa. Des Moines Police Department spokesman Jason Halifax stated that he hadn't seen cases of sexual assault related to the state's non-discrimination ordinance. We have not seen that. I doubt that's going to encourage the behavior. If the behavior is there, sexual predators are going to behave as they're going to behave, no matter what the laws are." Massachusetts. Cambridge Police Superintendent. No incidents of transgender protections being abused. Minnesota. Minneapolis police spokesman John Elder told Media Matters in an interview that sexual assaults stemming from Minnesota's 1993 transgender non-discrimination law has been not even remotely a problem. Based on his experience, the notion of men posing as transgender women to enter women's restrooms to commit sex crimes sounds a little silly, Elder said. According to Elder, a police department inquiry found nothing in the way of such crimes in the city. Nevada. Asked whether Nevada's 2011 gender identity law had fueled a rise in sex crimes, Las Vegas Police Department spokesman Jesse Roybal told Media Matters the answer would be no. After the department's lieutenant for sexual assault ran a check of crimes since 2011, Roybal told Media Matters that the department had not had any incidents involving transgender suspects. New Mexico. Officer Tazia Martinez, public information officer for the Albuquerque Police Department, said, "We are unaware of any cases of assault in our city as a result of transgendered accommodations." Vermont. Montpelier Police Chief Tony Fakos responded to an email inquiry about whether the state's non-discrimination law had led to incidents of rape or sexual assault in women's restrooms, stating, "We do not have any complaints related to this issue," end quote. So conservatives, when they talk about the subject, they dream up all sorts of hypotheticals and thought experiments and fantasies about, perverts entering bathrooms and molesting or assaulting women, but it just doesn't match up with the actual reality of the situation. They're like, what if this happens? What if that happens? And it's just like, it doesn't. Just look at the fucking data. This is example number 12 million of how conservative viewpoints are just completely disconnected from facts and disconnected from reality. These pro-trans policies, it's also worth pointing out that they're not some sort of pie-in-the-sky, untested hypotheticals, where it's like, oh, if we enact this, what if this or that would happen? But it's just like, dude, these policies are old fucking news. Many of these states or locales that we just covered, they've had these pro-transgender policies in place for well over a decade. The data is in on this subject, and, if you actually look at the fucking data, and you look at the research, you find that it's quite conclusive, and it's very consistent. And, for all their talk about facts over feelings, Republicans, this is their mantra. It's the slogan that they're constantly harping and repeating. You need to put the facts before your feelings. This is one subject where they really do put their feelings over the facts. You show them this research, you show them the data, and they're just like, well, I just feel that there would be incidents of somebody entering a bathroom, wearing a dress to sexually assault women. I just intuitively it just seems to make sense to me that that would happen.
Many women feel less safe.
But, the actual facts, the actual data, the actual research does not bear this out. Now, in that same video, Steven Crowder, he dresses up in drag, apparently in some sort of strange attempt to own the libs on this subject, and it's really quite strange to watch, actually. Transgenderism debunked. Now, he goes into a Planet Fitness gym dressed up like this to work out, and apparently he's expecting to just completely shock and scandalize everybody in there, anticipating total outrage at the thought that there's a quote-unquote man dressed up as a woman, they're exercising at the gym with them. Instead, what actually happens in the video is literally nobody gives a fuck, nobody cares, nobody points and laughs, nobody disparages him or demeans him or attempts to humiliate him. Instead, everybody in the gym just minds their fucking business. Really setting an example that I think Republicans like Steven Crowder would do well to try to emulate on this subject. Like at one point in the video, he goes up to this Asian kid and he asks him to spot him on a workout. Apparently expecting just total hilarity to ensue. He's like, man, this is gonna be so good. Like, this guy's reaction is gonna be priceless. And instead the kid's just like, sure, whatever. And just spots him on the fucking workout and just goes back to doing what he was doing and just minds his fucking business. Like, it doesn't impact his life in any way whatsoever, and he's just not a fucking asshole about it.
Excuse me, I just need just some help to get the weight up, and in case, just in case for safety, but I should be good. Help me get these weights just up, just help lift them up. So there you go, one. Perfect, thank you, yes. Okay, thank you.
So, I'm not really sure what Steven Crowder was trying to prove here. Really, I think he was just probably looking for another excuse to just dress up as a woman. I mean, this guy, he dresses up in drag every fucking chance that he gets. Example number 1, example number 2, example number 3, example number 4. I mean, I would tell this guy to come out of the closet, but it really seems like he enjoys spending his time in there. Now, Crowder tries to cobble together some sort of point at the end of this video, really just desperately grasping for a good idea, and this is the best that he can come up with.
But how do they know that I'm not sincere? Honestly, I told them that I want to be a woman and want to use the ladies' restroom. That's about as much proof as anyone else is providing these days. Who are they to tell me that I am not a woman or I don't choose to be a woman? Unless we're going to submit all of ourselves to a physical before we take a tinkle. What's the barometer? Where's the line? Should there be a line at all?
How do they know you're not sincere? How about you dress up in fucking drag all the time to try to own the libs and try to make a YouTube video where you talk about how absurd transgenderism is? I feel like that's a pretty fucking solid indicator that you're not doing this in good faith. Also, just consider the stupidity of what's being argued here. The point he's trying to make is these pro-trans bathroom policies, they open the door to people exploiting these policies and falsely claiming to be transgender. But from all the research I've done on the subject, the only consistent, reliable indicator of whether a person will falsely claim to be transgender is if their name is Steven Crowder. Like, he's literally the only fucking person I've ever seen or heard of doing this. So they claim, this policy, these pro-trans policies, they open the door to people doing this in bad faith. But it's just like, dude, you're the only one who's doing this in bad faith. So it's like, this policy opens the door to me being an asshole. And I'm just like, okay, well, just stop being a fucking asshole about it. Problem solved. Crowder seems to be arguing here that, it's invalid when I do it, therefore it's invalid when they do it. But the thing is, transgender people, they aren't claiming to be having their internal experience. They're not claiming this to make a clever, funny point in a YouTube video. Like, this is their genuine internal experience. So, falsely claiming to be transgender, it doesn't invalidate their experience any more than pretending to enjoy sucking a penis to own the libs would somehow invalidate the internal experience of homosexual attraction that some people have. So, all he's really proving when he dresses up like a woman like this is that he really seems to enjoy putting on a dress. Now, maybe there is some tiny, infinitesimally small portion of the population that for whatever reason would find it appealing to dress up like a woman and go into the bathroom like Crowder and other Republicans claim. But honestly, what's the fucking appeal to this? Like, wow, I get to listen to people take a dump. I get to watch them wash their hands. Yes! It's gonna be so exciting. I'm just like, dude, you know, maybe there are some creeps that for some strange reason get off on that, but it's just like, to frame it and position it, like, there are so many people in this country who would do that it would be some sort of nationwide epidemic. I think that's just completely fucking absurd. Now, what about the sexual assault argument specifically? You know, this Crowder, he made some sort of safety argument in that video, and Republicans, they make this point all the time. And really, I think they just do not think through the logic of what they're saying here. Because, you know, the argument they make, they're like, if you enact these pro-trans bathroom policies, pervert men, they're gonna put on dresses, and they're gonna go in there to sexually assault women. But I'm just like, dude, what does the fucking dress have to do with anything? Like, he could just walk in there and sexually assault them. He doesn't need to wear a fucking dress to do it, you know? Like, there's not some force field at the entrance of a women's bathroom where it's like, you're wearing a dress, you can come in. You're not wearing a dress, So it's just like, what does the fucking dress have to do with anything? It's totally irrelevant. Or it's like, what's stopping a pervert man from going into a men's bathroom and sexually assaulting a young man? He could even wear a fucking dress while he does it if he wants to. Like, there's no law written in the pervert handbook that says you must be wearing a dress when you sexually assault someone. It's just like they don't even think through what the fuck they're saying here. So, you know, what the person wears when they commit a fucking sexual assault, what the transgender bathroom policies are, all of this is just completely irrelevant to a conversation about sexual assault. In that Hazenbush et al. Study from earlier, they write the following, quote, additionally, the study finds that reports of privacy and safety violations in public restrooms, locker rooms, and changing rooms are exceedingly rare, end quote. And this is not at all surprising, because it's like, what kind of fucking moron would go into a public bathroom to sexually assault someone? Like, at a crowded Walmart, for example, where at any moment, several people could just walk in and catch you red-handed with your dress around your ankles. It's just like, what kind of fucking idiot would plan out this sort of sexual assault? I mean, this would have to be the dumbest fucking criminal on earth. He's like, all right, how am I going to do this, you know? I could do a sketchy back alley. Maybe I could do some sort of like secluded, isolated walking trail late at night. You know what? How about the public bathroom at Denny's, where if the woman screams, the whole fucking restaurant is going to hear it. That's where I'm going to commit my sexual assault. I mean, this is not exactly a criminal mastermind here that we're talking about. And it's just like, look, even if conservatives were right about this, that this did happen, that there was some sort of harebrained, Wile E. Coyote type sexual assault epidemic of, you know, perverts putting on dresses to sexually assault people in bathrooms, literally like something out of a Sunday cartoon show. Even if this did happen, transgender people would not be the problem here. This would be cis men cynically exploiting transgenderism for their own perversion. So, like, what bearing does this even have to a conversation about transgender individuals and the validity of their experience and what policies should center around them? Because you're really talking about a totally different group of people just exploiting their identity. Sexual assault, also consider, it would still be a crime if we had these pro-trans policies in place. It's not like this suddenly greenlights sexual assault, and it's like, we're powerless to do anything about this. I mean, they would still get fucking locked up and thrown in jail for this. So, you know, I'm not sure why they position it like, oh no, it's gonna open the door to this. It's still a fucking criminal offense. And really stop to consider the stupidity of trying to enforce these sort of anti-trans bathroom policies. Like, how would you enforce this? Are we going to have mandatory genital checks at the entrance of bathrooms before you can enter, where we have to, you know, examine the genitalia to make sure that you know, you're good? Yeah, you're going to the correct bathroom. How much is that going to cost the taxpayers or these private companies to station somebody there with their fucking rubber gloves to do an inspection every time you need to take a fucking piss? Republicans, they'll say things like, well, you know, women would be uncomfortable just knowing that there's somebody in the bathroom with them who has a penis. And, you know, here's my question for them. How, unless you checked their genitalia, how would you know it's a trans person? How would you know that they have a penis? Like, I don't know what Steven Crowder's typical bathroom experience is like, but mine generally do not involve comparing my genitals with the other people in there. So how would you know they have a penis? Like, you know, setting aside this right-wing caricature of the bearded lumberjack who puts on the pretty pink dress and goes in there, just a normal fucking trans person living their life, minding their business, going about their day. How would you know that they're a trans person? How would you know they have a penis unless you examined it, you know? And what if it's, there's post-op trans people and there's pre-op trans people? What if it's a post-op trans person where they've had the surgery and, you know, their genitals have been altered and so they don't have the penis? Like, is that acceptable under this criteria, or does it need to be authentic female genitalia for it to meet their threshold? And I really just have to reiterate that this is a fucking bathroom that we're talking about here. Like, you go in there, you take a fucking dump, you wash your hands, and then you just move on with your life. The idea that at any step of this process, transgenderism somehow poses some sort of safety risk to the other people in there is just completely fucking outlandish. Crowder, he had a debate on the subject with a transgender mayor, and she pointed out to him that there's no way that he or anybody else would be able to know who is or isn't a trans person. Now, just to be clear on this, because I know this can be confusing, in this particular video, Steven Crowder is the one who's not dressed up like a woman. Just want to make that clear.
If you didn't know, if you didn't ask, if you didn't look, you wouldn't know. If you didn't know, it wouldn't be a problem. That's the whole point. We've been doing this. You've been going to the bathroom with transgender people your whole life.
No, listen. That's not true.
Really?
We can tell.
It is true.
We can tell.
No, you can't.
Jess, respectfully, I can tell.
Oh, Steven Crowder can tell, huh? I guess he's some sort of transgender penis whisperer or something. You know, maybe you agree with him on this, where you're like, dude, yeah, I'd totally be able to tell which one's a transgender person. So let's put your abilities to the test and play a game called Identify the Trans Person. Here's the way it works. I'm going to show you a photograph of a person, and you need to guess whether they're cis or trans. And, you know, using your crack trans identification skills...
Really?
We can tell.
It is true.
We can tell.
No, you can't.
We're going to find out, are you able to correctly identify who was born biologically male versus who was born biologically female. Now, in order to actually test this, so that we have data to look at, type your answers for all 8 people in the comments section before I reveal the results. And regardless of your views on the subject, I want everybody watching to participate and post your comment on this, because that way we're actually putting to the test this Steven Crowder claim that he and others can correctly distinguish between cis and trans people. No cheating here, okay? No editing your comments after the fact or posting after the results are in. Post your comment before I reveal the results, and we're going to put this claim to the test. Without further ado, let's play a game called Identify the Trans Person. Person number 1, cis or trans? Person number 2, cis or trans? Person number 3, cis or trans? Person number 4, are they cis or are they trans? Person number 5, cis or trans? Person number 6, cis or trans? Person number 7, cis or trans? And person number 8, cis or trans? Now let's give it a few seconds. Feel free to pause this video if you need to post your comments, and then we'll take a look at the results to find out how good of a job you did here. Alright, it's time for the results. Person number 1, trans. Person number 2, trans. Person number 3, trans. Person number 4, trans. Person number 5, trans. Person number 6, trans. Person number 7, trans. Person number 8, trans. Yes, that's correct. All 8 of the people I showed you are in fact transgender, and all 8 of them are actually well-known transgender beauty YouTubers, so you can actually easily verify this. Now, the question I have is how many of you got all 8 of them correct? Taking a look at the comment section, my guess is not very many got all 8 of them correct, and the point of this is you're not able to tell who actually is a cis or a trans person, despite what Steven Crowder claims. Also, after having taken a look at these photographs of these trans people, ask yourself, would it really be appropriate, as conservatives recommend and are advocating, if we were to force these trans women to use the men's bathroom, the men's locker room, you know, with their breasts and their makeup and their feminine hairstyles and their feminine physiques, you're really going to tell me these people belong in the fucking men's room? It's ironic because what Republicans claim they're trying to protect us from, you know, the quote-unquote wrong people in bathrooms or locker rooms, if we followed their policy, it would lead to the very outcome that they claim is outrageous and inappropriate, which is people that are very out of place in the bathroom or the locker room. And if you want to talk about safety and protecting against sexual assault, do you really think forcing these trans women who look totally indistinguishable from any woman you'd see at a fucking grocery store, do you really think forcing them inside of a men's locker room, for example, to get naked and undressed with a bunch of men, you really think that's a great idea? the real irony is that if we actually follow the conservative policy here on this, that is what empirically increases sexual assault. Not just hypothetically from thought experiments, actual fucking data on this subject indicates this. In a Harvard EDU article, for example, they write the following, quote, transgender and gender non-binary teens face greater risk of sexual assault in schools that prevent them from using bathrooms or locker rooms consistent with their gender identity, according to a recent study. Researchers looked at data from a survey of nearly 3,700 U.S. teens aged 13 to 17. The study found that 36% of transgender or gender non-binary students with restricted bathroom or locker room access reported being sexually assaulted in the last 12 months. Of all students surveyed, 1 out of every 4, or 25%, reported being a victim of sexual assault in the past year. So if conservatives really were interested in protecting against sexual assault when it comes to their bathroom and locker room policies like they claim, they would actually support these pro-trans policies. They would not be in opposition to them. And, Republicans, they frame it up like the trans people, like they're the perverts, they're the creeps, they're the weirdos that are going to sexually assault you. The actual data shows, no, trans people, they're actually the victims here. They're not the perpetrators. And so, as on so many issues, Republicans, they just have this completely backwards. In that same debate, Jess made the point that these anti-trans viewpoints, not only do they lead to violence and sexual assault against trans women, as we just saw, but they also lead to the assault of masculine-looking cis women.
So in Frisco, not too long ago, a man saw what they thought was a transgender woman going in the bathroom. He went in the bathroom, drug her out, and assaulted her. She just happened to be a little bit masculine.
This gets back to the earlier point that there's no way to be able to clearly ascertain who was or wasn't born biologically male. Merely looking masculine isn't, it's not a good enough criteria because there are plenty of cis women who were born biologically female that look a lot more masculine than others. Much more so than a lot of the trans women that are out there and that we just saw the photographs of. Obviously, Crowder, he's against this sort of violence and he's not advocating it or anything like that. But, from an enforcement standpoint, in terms of how we're going to screen the people out and determine who goes into what bathroom, looking masculine, it's just it's not a good enough criteria. Because that doesn't reliably distinguish between cis and trans people. So the point is, there's no functional way to enforce what Crowder is advocating here. Now, in terms of the whole safety and sexual assault and perversion arguments, I think conservatives are definitely on better footing in terms of locker rooms versus bathrooms, where people just fucking take a dump in a bathroom stall and, wash their hands in a sink. It's like going into a locker room where people are getting undressed and naked and changing. I feel like that would definitely have much more appeal to some sort of pervert trying to get in there and ogle people, But really that same logic from earlier applies here as well, where it's like forcing these trans women to get naked in a men's locker room. That would just be completely inappropriate. Not just for them, based on their gender identity, but also for the other people in the locker room, using this Republican criteria of sameness of genitalia and outward physical shell. So it's just clear that their policy preferences are not the correct answer, whether we use our criteria or theirs. It's not the right way to go about this. And the logic that they're using here regarding, perversion in locker rooms, it's not being applied consistently across the board. Because what they argue, they say, look, pervert men, they're going to take advantage of this. And they're going to go in there to ogle naked women who are changing. Because, they're sexually attracted to them. And by that same logic that they're using, shouldn't we exclude homosexual men from men's locker rooms? Because they could be going in there, maybe it's some pervert homosexual who's trying to sneak a peek at some attractive men while they're naked, just to take a peek at them. Lesbian women could be doing the same thing. Maybe there's some lesbian who goes in there and she's taking a look around. She likes what she sees. What about bisexuals? Where's a bisexual going to change at? Because, you put him in the men's locker room, he might be ogling the men. Put him in with the ladies, he could be ogling the ladies. So, they're completely fucked. Where are they going to change at? So why would we have a policy that only punishes just one group of people and only singles them out? And why would we collectively punish trans people because of people who are falsely claiming to be trans just for their own cynical perversion? None of this makes any sense, and the logic is just not applied consistently. And, just as with sexual assault in bathrooms, if you had somebody who was just openly staring at naked people in locker rooms and just being a total creep, and a pervert and just weirding everybody out and making them uncomfortable. It's like, what does transgenderism have to fucking do with this? You know, the fundamental problem here is creepy perverts weirding everybody out. Like, transgenderism is not the fucking problem here. It's not the core crux of the issue. Like, you could have a gay man in a men's locker room who's ogling people, and, you know, it would be the same problem. So the transgenderism, it has nothing to fucking do with it. And if there was somebody who was just being this massive creep and pervert in a locker room, just like ogling people, and he's just a total weirdo he's got like a boner or whatever, and he's just like, just like looking at everyone and just making them super uncomfortable, they would get kicked out of the fucking place. Like, he would get banned from the facility. They'd probably call the fucking cops and be like, hey, there's this extremely strange pervert in here freaking everybody the fuck out. Can you get him out of here? You know, depending upon the severity of what he was doing, he'd probably get prosecuted for some sort of sexual harassment type charge. So again, it gets back to that point that these pro-trans policies don't somehow green light or give a thumbs up to sexual assault or sexual harassment or any of these things that people are complaining about. And there would still be laws and policies in place and measures that we could use to fight against this and guard against it. So again, it's just like, what the fuck does transgenderism have to do with this? Really, regardless of how you look at this, Republicans, they're just wrong at every single level. Fundamentally, what it kept coming down to for Crowder in that debate was that you should use the bathroom or the locker room that corresponds to your sex at birth. And he kept repeatedly arguing and harping on the point that his position was grounded in biological science versus the so-called feelings-based position of the other side.
But our current society, right now in the modern world, we recognize sex biologically. The onus is on someone else who wants to upend that because of a political movement based on gender. And I don't believe that anyone's made a convincing argument. I don't think there's anything wrong with a state or a city saying you use the bathroom that applies to your sex. There is no biology for the basis of gender and how someone identifies or feels.
Now, first off, he's just wrong to describe pro-transgenderism as just a political movement based on gender. Like, obviously political decisions come into play here, but transgenderism itself, that's not political. That's no more political than saying homosexual attraction it's a political movement based on homosexual attraction. It's just, it's a category error to even say that. Like, you're talking about two totally different things here. There's the phenomenon itself, transgenderism itself, and then, you know, political decisions that stem and result from that phenomenon. So just to class it up as like, oh, it's purely political to support these policies based on transgenderism. It's like, no, the fundamentals of transgenderism, there's nothing political about it. And in terms of the biology and the science behind it, Republicans, they love to claim that they have the scientific high ground on this subject. You know, they're always talking about how their views are rooted in biology, in the facts of science, and the genetics, and they're actually just completely fucking wrong about this. Transgenderism, it's accepted as valid and psychologically healthy for these individuals who are transgender by all of the leading, most relevant expert organizations that specialize in these respective fields. We're talking about the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, really all of the top leading, most relevant organizations who are most qualified to weigh in on this. They accept transgenderism as valid, psychologically healthy, not indicative of mental illness or delusion, like Republicans claim. So to claim that the pro-trans policy is somehow unscientific or not backed by the scientific community, it's just completely false, and the exact opposite is actually the case. Now, I covered the biology and the psychology behind transgenderism quite extensively in my Ben Shapiro transgenderism video, so I'm not going to rehash all those same arguments in the same level of detail, but there's a link in the description to that video if you want to check it out. That said, I will play a brief clip from that video that really just covers the core essence of what Republicans get wrong here when they make these kinds of science-based arguments. Now, it's important to distinguish here between two different things: the internal cognitive or psychological experience and state that a person has, and their chromosomes. There's no necessary biological reason that the two necessarily must be 100% correlated with one another. Because, you know, the case conservatives make is it's like, you know, somebody who's born a male at birth has the male chromosomes, and so logically from that, the argument they make is therefore the internal psychological cognitive state of this person must also be be male and correspond to what the chromosomes are. And, really there's just so much more to psychology and cognition and conscious experience than just your mere chromosomes. Like, there can be genetic factors that play a role, there can be epigenetic factors, there can be developmental factors, environmental factors, cultural factors, and just to look at the chromosomes and be like, your psychological state must always, therefore, perfectly correlate with that. There's really no psychological or biological or neurological reason why that's necessarily the case. So the key point to understand here is that because psychology and cognition are not necessarily 100% tied to one's sex chromosomes or outward physical sex organs, there's no necessary biological or psychological reason that transgenderism, feeling like a woman who's trapped in a man's body, for example, there's no necessary biological reason that is somehow at odds with biology or is otherwise unscientific. And because the medical and the psychological community, the most relevant experts, most qualified to weigh in on this, because they accept the validity of transgenderism and the transgender internal experience that they're having, it makes sense to treat them as such and to allow them to live their lives accordingly. Fundamentally, what it comes down to is, do we accept the validity of their internal states? And that's something that all of the most relevant experts and leading medical, psychological organizations do, and that's what we should do as well. Republicans like Crowder, Ben Shapiro, any old Republican in the fucking comment section, they might disagree with these organizations when they accept transgenderism as a valid internal state, but it's not up to right-wing radio hosts to make these sort of decisions. Like Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, they're not the ones who officially ascertain what is or isn't a mental illness. Like, there are entire fields made up of experts and fucking PhDs and researchers who have dedicated their lives to studying these fields. And, they look at the different psychological states and the mental states, and they go about classifying and diagnosing what is not a mental illness, what's delusional. And, there are experts who specialize in this shit, and it's their life's work. And all of these experts in these organizations, their conclusions on the subject are very clear. And it's that the Republican position, which rejects this internal experience of transgenderism, that position is just wrong. Just as it would be wrong to say, homosexuals, they're not actually attracted to men. It would be equally as wrong to reject the internal experience of trans people. Crowder, he dismisses this idea of consulting someone's feelings. He kept framing it up in that debate. It's the fact-based position versus the feelings-based position. And the idea of consulting one's feelings or their internal experience on this matter, to him, that's completely outrageous. But that's literally what the fuck we're talking about here. Like, how somebody feels on the inside versus their outward biology. That's a literal description of transgenderism. It's the incongruency between a person's sex at birth, their sex chromosomes, their outward physical shell, and the internal experience they have of what gender they feel like or what they identify as. That's why you hear it described so often as like a woman trapped in a man's body. So, conservatives, they always seem to view it as some sort of axiom that feelings are they're totally invalid to any sort of rational conversation, and we should never take them into consideration. But this is a literal discussion here of a person's internal psychological feelings. We're talking about the internal experience of transgender people. So I'd say the feelings are pretty fucking relevant in this case. It's like, what? So we're just gonna trust this gay man when he says that he feels attracted to men? It's just like, yeah, we're gonna fucking trust his feelings on this matter, because that's what the fuck we're talking about, the way that they feel internally. So it's actually extremely stupid to dismiss feelings or take some sort of an anti-feelings case in a conversation that's centered around the literal way that people feel. So, on the fundamental question that conservatives like Steven Crowder ask of should we just trust how transgenders feel on this subject, the answer is yes, that's exactly what we should do. I'm on Patreon. There's a link in the bio if you'd like to support my work. I would really appreciate it. There's also some links in the description to my social media sites if you want to follow me on there, help me build up those followings. I would really appreciate it. Subscribe, hit the bell, comment, like, the fucking drill on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this.